Hello, it's Giles Whittell. We're recording this episode in front of an audience in our newsroom from Tortoise. Welcome to the news meeting.
Seismic moves in the presidential race. Kamala Harris has basically secured the Democratic nomination for president, locking up the delegates, taking in more than $100 million overnight.
Bangladesh remains tense, with some students having vowed to continue protests a day after the Supreme Court scrapped most of the government job quotas they were demonstrating against.
The Bibi Stockholm barge, which has been used to house hundreds of migrants, is to be closed.
Andy Murray has now confirmed that this summer's Olympics will be his last professional event.
Now, it is the BBC's biggest primetime Saturday night show, but lately it's less known for its sequence and more for the scandal behind the scenes.
Nominations to the Tory leadership race open tomorrow, but will we have to wait until November to find out who the party's members choose to replace Rishi Sunak?
To help me make sense of what should be leading the news this week, I'm joined by Tortoise reporter Stephen Armstrong. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
By our contributing editor, Hashim Mohammed. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
And we're joined by our special guest, Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, who is a journalist, author, and columnist, it says here, but you're many other things too. Thank you for joining us. And we will start with our long stories short, I should say. We will also find out what our audience here thinks should be leading the news, but let's start with our guests and long stories short. So this is where in a single sentence or a few words, you tell us what your story is about. Stephen, why don't you start?
The election just got coconut pilled.
Are you Brat?
I'm so not Brat.
I don't think we will ever be Brat. Okay, Hashi, what's your long story short?
Labour, indiscipline or indifference?
This is to do with the Magnificent Seven, right?
Correct.
Yasmin.
Britain's shame, a national emergency, violence against women goes on.
Okay, speaks for itself. Let us get into them in more detail. Thank you all very much. But Stephen, let's start with you. Tell us more about your story and why you think it should lead.
So let me first qualify this by saying that I am a Gen X dad, and therefore not only woefully underqualified to fully understand the nuances of this story, but have only been fully aware of it because I've been reported on it in real time by my two daughters. So this
that makes you pretty qualified. You are a dad of Gen X people.
Dad of Gen Zs. Zs.
You are personally Gen X, is that right?
I'm personally Gen X. They're
Does that
Gen
mean
Z.
I am too?
Yeah, I'd say so, yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. Okay.
Yeah. Do you have a resentment of authority? And like loud guitar music?
No.
It goes either way. Well, look, the easiest way for me to explain this is to show, not tell. So I want to, if I could, show you a video.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Okay, we need to describe a little bit of what happened there. Do you want to do that?
What we saw was a sort of cut-up graphic of the current Vice President and expected Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris, sort of in a kind of Monty Python style, coming towards the screen. There, Monty Python, look at that reference.
It's okay.
When did they have a palm tree in Monty Python?
It was an early episode. Then the colour, I'm going to get the colour wrong as well. I would say apple green, it's probably lime green, but it's a green, it's a fluorescent green backdrop, which is the cover of the album Brat by the British singer Charlie XCX. And that is one of her songs that you can hear underneath it. And there is, of course, as my colleague has suggested, a coconut tree. Now, Kamala Harris is saying, you should just fall out of a coconut tree. You are, in context of all that you've been. Now, this is a speech that she made where she was explaining the wisdom of her mother. And she made the line, have you just fallen out of a coconut tree, which was quoting her mother, and she burst out laughing. This great, warm, throaty chuckle. And what happened when she did this about a year ago is that Republican memesters started chopping up the speech and sending out to mock her for her idiocy and the mayhem, and this is ridiculous, Vice President. After President Biden's, well, not less than satisfactory debate performance, certain members of the Democratic Party started putting out that they were coconut pilling this election, which is a reference to the Trump red pilling, Matrix reference about entering the real world, being red pilled, understanding, letting the scales fall from your eyes. And that being coconut pilled is deciding that you think Kamala Harris should be the Democratic candidate.
So let me just follow this. So she needs to fall out of the tree to save the...
I think it doesn't bear that much analysis.
Right. So I'm just trying to follow the logic of it.
If you emoji a coconut or a palm tree underneath your message, at that point, you were a secret Kamala supporter. Then, when Biden stepped down, the singer, Charlie XCX, said, Kamala is caps brat. And this...
Brat is now an adjective?
Yes, it means... let me just be as specific as I can.
I can't understand a word of this.
We're going to get there, Yasmin.
So, as Charlie XCX explains, brat is a girl who's a little bit messy, who likes to party. The look for the summer is a packet of cigarettes, a bit lighter, and a strappy white top with no bra. So, admittedly, that is a very specific description which doesn't quite match the current vice president. But it's
So is it based on the Brat dolls?
No, but that's a good reference. That's one that I get. So Charlie XCX is she's 31. She's really kind of millennial. She's not very Gen Z, and it's really about sort of a kind of party girl album. It's a bit dealing with mental health. It's going to parties. It's being very the opposite of previous social media clean girl looks, which have been very much about living the pure, very tailored life. It's just being messy and being happy with your messiness. So. The intriguing thing about this on so many levels, apart from my inability to explain it, is that the album Brat is the album of the summer. It's huge. All TikTok, there's been these particular dances called the Apple Dance, which I'm not going to do for you because someone did that on CNN and it almost ended their career.
Plus, this is audio. No one would see it.
Even so, people in this room would, and it would spread. But since all of this began to spread out over the interwebs, we've seen one particular, the Kamala is Brat post by Charlie XCX has been seen 51.6 million times since it was posted on Sunday. That is a lot. That's about 3 days worth of people looking at it. And that is, there's a Democratic strategist who's estimated the value of that in terms of free media, and it's in the millions and millions of dollars.
Not necessarily positive.
Can I ask just a question? That coconut,
Yes.
did it have any significance? Because you know how coconut is used.
Well, I understand.
Somebody went to jail for calling somebody a coconut.
Yeah.
This is different.
But this is the reference to the line that Kamala's mother would say to her, which is, you young people, you think you've fallen out of a coconut tree and you're brand new to the world.
But there wasn't a double meaning?
No,
okay.
not at that point.
All right.
It came from
Kamala's mum is, her name is Shyamala Gopala.
Yeah,
she's from
she's
Chennai,
Indian, yeah.
and she is a breast cancer researcher. So for her, the reference is not as clearly racist as it is in other
But
contexts.
the way it's used, it couldn't be.
Not in that context.
Okay.
So everything, of course, can be repurposed in all sorts of ways, but the way that Harris was using it was
But the next line in that, you think you fell out of a coconut tree, you exist in your context, I think she says something like that.
And everything that's come before you.
That's it.
That you're part of society. All of the people who've contributed to you, you're not fresh to this world. Everything is not brand new. You're part of something bigger. Everything is context. So the idea is this is actually at least a very coherent statement by a politician in America, which is something that has been lacking quite a lot recently. But this level of internet activity, whether or not it is directly connected, certainly since Harris was the most likely successor, there have been over 40,000 new voter registrations in the US, of which 83% have been 18 to 34. Mm-hmm. Biden's problem, the Democrats have been losing ground with young black and Hispanic voters. And whilst it is safe to say that the internet, socials exist in a very particular world, and it's, on the one hand, winning an election is not done by memes. On the other hand, one of the things about Donald Trump is that he energizes his base to get active and post and say things, have a belief. And I don't think that even when Biden won in 2020, I didn't get the feeling that there was this swelling support, belief. People weren't making celebratory stories about him. And this feels like it's an injection of belief and energy into the election from the Democratic side. Now, there's a woman called Kelly Hayer, who is the woman who invented the Apple dance, which I'm not going to do because it will end my career.
Come on.
And they came to her as the TikToker who'd invented the Apple dance and say, what do you think of this whole business? And she said, well, to win my vote, Kamala Harris needs to promise to legalise and protect abortion at a federal level and wear apple green. And what I love about that is the way that this smashing, really, of popular culture and politics that Gen Z have and millennials have in a way which these things exist in, in a way which, as a Gen Xer, I remember in the early 80s where you might have with certain bands which would be at number one but still doing songs which have very powerful political statements. So I like the way that pop culture and politics are merging in that way.
Thank you, Steve. Yasmin, the way I see this, having spent most of the last 48 hours in the office being tutored on this, is quite simple, which is that those video clips that have been used to mock her by Republicans for the past 2 years have now been repurposed to do exactly the opposite. And that coincides with a rather successful initial campaign speech, which is quite exciting, isn't it? What do you think about that?
I'm not sure. I mean, I get all of that, and I think it is exciting. And actually, it's not the first time pop music or pop musicians or stars have kind of been very successfully messaging a politician or packaging a politician. My only anxiety is this is all surface. This is all what you see. It's all about visuals, isn't it? And actually, politics is not that. And I am concerned about the coconut because I know Kamala Harris has, in her time, been called a coconut for the way she went along with a lot of policies of Biden's, which I've got a lot of black friends in America. Initially, they were so excited, a Caribbean woman and an Indian woman, and I was excited. But eventually, they thought she deliberately vanished her color and her background. And the word coconut was used about her. So it's just a little observation.
The thing about the speech that everybody's talking about being so successful was the 17-minute clip that I saw. I didn't watch all of it, but what was so fascinating to me was I watched it and I didn't think that it was particularly electrifying, but because we've been having to deal with Trump and Biden for the last few years, it's such a low bar.
It's also because she was kept down and out.
It's amazing how she's been kept quiet. She never really spoke much.
They kept her out and down.
I always thought that it was because she was gaffe prone. Maybe that is also true. But it was also because the more she would have spoken, the more people would have compared her to Biden.
Exactly.
And said, actually, look at this young and vigorous person compared to this man who's just barely standing.
And let's beware double standards. I mean, if you want two people who are not just gaffe prone but have been talking nonsense for a long time, it's Trump and Biden.
Biden is also, massively gaffe prone. So, but yeah, it's exciting, but the extent to which she'll be any different to what Biden has been doing largely,
I think she will be different, but I think she will disappoint. Like Obama in the end disappointed, because there was so much that happened. Because it's politics, it's real life politics.
All politics ends in failure.
And failure. And I know Obama still is heroic, and I still think he was a fantastic president, but I cannot forgive the extrajudicial killings he authorized of people in Afghanistan. This was so unlawful.
He killed more people than Bush ever did.
Exactly. And therefore, so all I'm saying is, but I thought she was stirring, that she'd been released, that there was this passion, high intelligence shone through. And I've seen a couple of the things on normal video, which is now, I suppose, 18th century in our
What's normal video?
The normal things that you watch, so they pay for these things, they shoot out messages on American television. There's a wonderful one which had, I'm a lawyer, I go for sexual predator.
Oh, I saw that. I saw that.
Oh, well, I thought
it was very good.
Brilliant.
Very good.
Can we just take a step back briefly? Hashi, and then you, Stephen, you have the last word on this as well.
As a millennial.
She, at the moment, is being crowned nominee. It is not going to be contested. Is that going to hurt her in terms of legitimacy with centrist swing voters?
It's interesting because has Obama actually endorsed her yet? Because I was reading that apparently Obama and Michelle Obama are yet to endorse her.
Yeah, his first remarks was explicitly to express his hope for an open contest.
Exactly, because
Yes.
I've read through various American press that he was hoping for an open primary that would then go on towards the Democratic meeting that they normally have in the summer to select somebody and go on. But the danger, they've got a double-edged sword here. If you open it up to a primary, you're instinctively accepting that as vice president, she was never ready to be president. That's the problem,
really
right?
interesting.
That's the point. Because if you're vice president, you've been selected because at any time you should be able to take over the top job. By opening it up to a primary, you're inadvertently saying she was never going to be ready, therefore we need to open it up. That's the danger, that's the problem they're facing. So I think it has to go to her. Otherwise, anything else would not look very good. That was my instinct.
The argument for the riskier approach of a contested mini primary is these are exceptional circumstances. Trump poses exceptional risks to American democracy, so you need to take exceptional risks. What do you think?
I mean, I think that the intriguing thing is about the way that society moves around politicians and the way that society is moving around her, and that this is what a group of young people are excited about. I think, whilst I accept that there are many problems with all politicians, for instance, I remember watching the comedian Ahir Shah saying there was something exciting for him as a Hindu watching Rishi Sunak enter number 10 Downing Street, and no one commenting on the fact that this was a Hindu Prime Minister that he was aware of. There comes a moment in society where things change and things pass and they move on. And this feels like a moment where it's not, there are so many things about her that no one's really mentioning.
Yeah.
It's no longer a big deal. And I think that's exciting.
It's a form of progress, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's a very big deal, and I think we may here in London be guilty of looking at the whole spectacle through, shall I say, libtard-tinted spectacles.
I've got one last thing about Kamala Harris.
Go on.
I was stuck in a traffic jam and her motorcade drove past me. And I've got a video to prove it. I thought, I don't know if that's important, but...
So she too has a motorcade?
She had, vice president, right? She had a massive motorcade.
Where was this traffic jam?
This was on the North Circular.
Oh, really?
Literally on the North Circular.
I live on the North Circular. She drove past my house.
Literally, I was at the top of the traffic lights, at the red lights, and the motorbike...
How did you know it was her?
Because... about 20 cars went by. I went online, and she was here for some AI conference, and it was all American plated cars because they fly everything over, don't they?
All right, we'll believe him. Okay.
I'll send you a video, Giles.
Stephen, thank you.
Meme it.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Hashi, your turn. What's your story?
Yes, normal story here, and I've titled it Labour, Indiscipline or Indifference. I just want to remind people that in order for me to get myself into this, I have to believe that I need to win this pitch. So obviously I just need to...
You're a lawyer, we know that.
I have to win.
We know that. It's your job.
Exactly. So my story is about, just introducing it, what happened last night when the Labour Party, the government of the day, had a rebellion of 7 members of Parliament who voted down and wanted to rebel on this question of removing the 2-child cap. Now, those 7 members of Parliament have been immediately suspended.
2-child cap to child benefit.
To child benefit, which would cost something like £2 billion a year.
To lift?
To lift it.
Or 3.5.
3.5.
Was it 3.5?
Quite a lot of money.
3.5 billion a year. And the Labour Party said, so far, they have every intention to wanting to remove it, but just not yet. But they want to be seen to be fiscally responsible and so on and so forth. Now, the bit I'm interested in is the decision to immediately suspend these 7 members of Parliament. Is this a form of strength that is being demonstrated by our new overlord, Sir Keir Starmer? Or is it something that he is going to regret later on? And I think that's quite important. So first things first, it was in the manifesto, it was in the King's speech, it's about his authority. You can see the rationale of behaving the way that he has behaved.
Let's be clear, what was in the King's speech? That they would lift it at some point, or that they wouldn't lift it until they could afford it?
What was in the King's speech was a bit more better than that, actually. It was that they would commission a sort of a task force that would talk through and understand how to remove it and when to remove it, which is anytime a politician comes out and they say, we'll put together a task force or put an inquiry, it just usually means lots of money for barristers. But put that aside, it's a moral battleground issue, and it speaks to a very important issue at the heart of Labour politics and Labour ideas, which is about child poverty. So for me, when I think about it from that point of view, it's quite rational. But the other part is, here you go, now that you've set this tone, what happens in the next rebellion? Next time something else comes up and you have a few people rebelling, how are you going to deal with that? What happens when it's a bigger issue and you have a bigger rebellion? How many of the people who voted with you thought about rebelling but haven't, but will not like the way you've treated those who have rebelled? Suella Braverman stood up and wanted the cap removed. This is the madness that we're all living in these days. She gave this speech talking about how in Fareham she realised that the cap was causing child poverty in Fareham. I mean, that's the kind of parallel universe that we are living. So for me, the story is, in one sentence, setting such a high bar to discipline your members of parliament when you've got some 400 and something of them, this early on sets a standard that you're going to struggle to maintain throughout the rest of the parliament.
So let's be clear, do you think this is an error?
I think that he could have easily ignored this 7 and sort of poo-pooed them in the press as being completely irrelevant and completely and utterly out of touch. He's got the authority, I'm in power, I'm not even going to waste an authority of suspending you with you. That's how he should have reacted. But now he's given them a status they don't deserve, and he can't remove them because they're in Parliament for the next 5 years.
And actually, I don't agree with you that it's a status they don't deserve. I think those MPs who did what they did, and actually even the ones who abstained, knowing what Starmer is like, before he came to power, he was Mr. Thin-Skin. I'm really pleased. The last lot of, and this is my word, you don't have to agree, last lot of bastards have gone. I'm very pleased about that. But that doesn't mean that I lose all sense of direction or more. And what he did to my friend Diane Abbott, not just did, but then for months, really tortured her. He did it to my MP, which is why I voted for her, Rupa Haq. And he's got this authoritarian tendency. And I was hoping, now that he's got this majority, he will be able to say, I respect their views, but our programme is different. That's the way he could have behaved.
I completely agree with you. And I think what he's done actually in some ways shows a lack of confidence.
Exactly.
It shows a lack of confidence in his authority that is so high and so powerful at such an important time in his tenure. We've got so many other things coming up that he's going to have much bigger fights. But the last thing I'll say is this. It's really interesting because if I also think about the way he's behaved, he's still in that mode of, I need to be seen that I've moved the party on from Corbyn. Even though he hasn't realised that he's achieved that goal, he's now in power, he needs to govern. He's still struggling with that shift of, I've changed the Labour Party, this is who we are. Yes, you have, you're in power, dude, get on with it now. Mm-hmm. You're not fighting the same fringe that were once supporting Corbyn anymore. They're done. But now you've suspended them, they've led the press for a couple of days. Now, the media is going to be like, when's the next rebellion?
But I totally disagree with you on this. I think some of the MPs who stood out are extraordinarily good and honourable MPs.
I'm sure they're honourable, but they need to get...
They're not irrelevant. They're not this, are we done with Corbyn? I'm really pleased Corbyn got in. Actually, I'm really pleased with a large majority, because the authoritarianism and the power-mad Keir Starmer needs to remember that he didn't get his own way.
I completely understand that. The way we differ, sorry, Stephen, where we differ is I'm a big Labour Party supporter. I won't make any secrets about that. I'm disappointed in Keir Starmer on some things, including, for example, how he's handled Gaza. But I want a Labour Party and Labour government to succeed. We need them to succeed. We need them to actually get things done. And that requires discipline. That requires a focus. That requires a proper agenda, determination, and to get things through Parliament.
And some very good things have been announced. But I was very, very impressed about when this fantastic speech about we are going to focus on the education of the children who really have not had any attention for 14 years, to lift them. And Blair, to his credit, spent 10 years doing this. When he said education, education, he meant it. And I was really pleased to hear this from our new Education Secretary. But I don't think that the way you gain respect and power is to become an undemocratic, part nervous, part really authoritarian leader. I don't want a Labour Party with that kind of leader.
OK, someone tell me, how does party discipline work in this country? Because this decision was obviously taken, well, it seems to me it will have been taken after quite a lot of discussion. They will have seen this coming for days, if not weeks. This will have been a collective Starmer plus advisors plus cabinet decision. What's the thinking?
Well, I think there's two things in there. One is that there is an official Labour Party process for voting against the government, voting against the party for ignoring the whip, and you have to inform the whips beforehand. And these 7 didn't inform the whips that they were going to vote against the government. So there is a disciplinary issue, is their excuse. It's not that they are saying we don't like what you believe. What we're saying is, in disciplinary terms, you didn't follow the process of the Labour Party. Now, everything I'm saying here, I want to say I'm not casting any sort of moral judgment one way or the other on what happened. What has also happened is that in having the whip removed from them, they are not able to take part in the report that is going to come into changing and dealing with the child benefit cap.
The task force.
Yeah, the task force. So, and this was made very clear on the radio this morning. We were saying, well, they are now no longer part of the machinery of resolving this particular problem by making this decision.
Ironically.
Yeah, and so it's a very clear punishment that's being delivered for a very clear breach of party rules. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's a different thing. That's why it's being done, so that you are no longer going to be able to your promise to your constituents to engage on this. What you've done is you've voted, but you are now no longer going to be part of the solution. This is how it's being presented. And I think in this week, what we saw was Starmer faced the 2 challenges that are going to be part of the first year of government, which is, from the left, he's going to face the 2-child benefit poverty cap, and on the right he's going to face immigration. And Rishi Sunak came at him during Prime Minister's question times on immigration, and this is what he's going to have to fight now. This is what he's up against. So whether it works or whether it doesn't, whether it's right or whether it's wrong, to tackle Rishi Sunak at Prime Minister's question times and then close Bibi Stockholm is a very clear set of signals. So he's signalling massively, whether successfully or not, to his opponents that this is what he's going to fight them on and how hard he's going to fight.
Yasmin and Hashi, what do you make of the idea that rebellions are infectious, and if you're the leader in this system, you have to nip them in the bud?
I don't agree with that. Are we a democracy or not? And this
we're a parliamentary democracy.
I know, but time moves on. We're not living in the time of Gladstone and Disraeli. We have moved on. It's a whole new game. Communication, is extraordinary and so on. I think a good leader, a really confident leader, and this might be at the heart of it all, would allow a certain amount of dissent and even allow himself to change his mind on some things, instead of being the way he has been ever since he betrayed his friend Jeremy Corbyn and killed off every pledge he made. He needs to win people over. Like I said, I am really happy that we have a Labour government, but I don't want a Tory-light Labour government or a Prime Minister who is forever afraid of what this side is going to say or that. And the closing of Bibi Stockholm was a very, very important message, actually. A very good one.
You have the last word on this.
I think that you have to, as a prime minister, expect a certain level of loyalty and discipline if you are going to get things done. Keir Starmer showed that huge amount of loyalty towards Jeremy Corbyn when he was sat in his shadow cabinet. He might have betrayed him afterwards, but he showed him a significant amount of respect and loyalty. I do think that a level of rebellion can be infectious, and it can catch on, and it can cause you problems later on. But I also think, just like when I'm in an inquiry or a high court case, oftentimes if I hear my witness or the other side's witness say something that's relatively damaging to me, that only becomes damaging if I'm able to actually show that it's damaging and I don't have an answer for it. In the same way with Keir Starmer right now, to tackle 7 members of parliament within a month of getting into power on an issue that is really important to most Labour people.
And most people in this country.
And most people in this country, in this way, this early on, sets a tone for you, as I said earlier, that is going to cause you problems to come. And finally, you're in power now. You're not trying to cleanse the Labour Party. Act like you are in power.
And just to be very clear, because this is the news meeting, you're pitching this as a story about party management, not about child poverty.
It's about party management, it's about our democracy, it's about how you run a government, it's about how you respond to rebellion, it's about what it means for our country in the next 5 years if our government, for the first time in 14 years, has behaved like this within 2 weeks.
And it's an application to be an MP very soon in the next
Outrageous. All right. Outrageous. You're going to be on Jeremy Vine slagging me off.
He had plenty of time to apply if he wanted to. We've seen this coming for 4 years. Right. Thank you very much, Ashi. Yasmin, let's hear more about your story, a national emergency.
Yes, so my challenge here is how do I write a story which has been told over and over and over again, and nobody takes any notice. I've counted from my computer how many times I've written a story, how many women and girls suffer domestic violence or are killed, maimed, tormented. And in my new computer, the number was 45.
Articles that you've written?
Yeah, over the years. I've been a journalist a long time. Not all of them were about here, but it seems to me it's an old subject, and how do you make it matter? Because it doesn't, if these were dogs, people would care a lot. Look how they reacted to a horse being whipped. I did too. But there seems to be a kind of acceptance of this totally unacceptable thing that's going on. And the interesting thing that happened, the peg, is that the National Police Chiefs Council produced a report. So this didn't come from women's aid groups or domestic violence charities. It came from police chiefs who called it a national emergency. That in the last 5 years, all forms of violence against women, assault, stalking, harassment, rape, murder, sometimes both, has gone up by 37%. We remember Sarah Everard, and I really thought something will change here. And so I thought the way to think about this, maybe, is to tell the story of the deaths and the terrible experiences, but also kind of look at the impact when this happens to one female, right? Think of what then happens to the family. The children, okay? The children whose mother has been killed. The parents of the woman who has been killed, who might have depended on her emotionally, financially, in every way. The effect on the income of the household, the effect on who does the cooking, who looks after the family, all of that. If we could do that, maybe more people would think. I mean, there was a very good piece in one of the papers about the children who are left behind, who keep asking, where's mummy? Okay, what happens to them next? Do they end up in care? And there was a fantastic, and I've got it here with me, piece written by a young woman, Tasmin Low, I think she was, whose father killed her mother. So her father is Pakistani, her mother was English. And she's in her 20s or early 30s. And all her life, she has tried to cope with this impossible situation where her father, whom she loves, killed her mother, whom she loves, and has shown no remorse. And so I think the way, maybe, I just want people to wake up to this. I want people to see what's going on in this country, okay? And it was really interesting. I'll say this very briefly. When I first started writing on this, almost always the focus was on Asian families. So, you know, there were dowry deaths, so young brides.
Honor killings and...
Yeah, but the dowry deaths have stopped now, more or less. At one time, in many areas, but particularly the Midlands, young brides who were brought in from India, and they were often Hindu, very quickly after they were married, the family would throw oil on them in the kitchen, set them alight and say it was an accident. So this became a crisis, and they would take the dowry. So I used to write about that. I used to write about honor killings, about honor beatings, about all of that. And the impression grew that this was an ethnic minority issue. But actually, of course it isn't. Every class, a woman of every status, girls of every background are frightened of males. I was beaten regularly by my brother, and I even have marks on my body. And his justification is to make you a good girl. Well, he didn't do that, did he? But so I just think I want us to inject something into this story, so that men in particular, good men, and we have a lot of most men are good men, that they join with us in saying, you know, not in our name.
Yeah. Yasmin, two questions, one about the numbers and then about coming back to your point about how do you tell this story. A 37% increase in 5 years. My immediate response, reading about this in The Guardian, it was reported everywhere, was, is this better recording? But they had a graphic which showed that it could be bad recording because the real numbers are thought to be much higher again. Now, so the 37% number is, we are told, lower than estimated total incidents. Now, where do those estimates come from?
I think most of them are from women's charities.
Okay.
So there are many of them around, and actually one of the most impressive things that happened in the last 5 years is two women, I'm going to forget her name, I'm so old, Karen. They started something called, 5 years ago only, I think 6 years ago, nobody was counting the dead women in this country. Nobody, you know, you'd see a little story somewhere in a newspaper about 5 sentences. And they started putting together the femicide census, which just records all the women who have been killed. Some of them were stranger murders. A lot of them were by men they knew. And it's this idea, I mean, these awful killings last week, the crossbow killing, you know. A woman decided she didn't want to carry on a relationship, all of that. But also brothers, sometimes sons, sometimes grandsons.
Well, most women are killed by people they know.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things, it's the same with child abuse. There's all this thing about, you know, strangers and pedophiles, but actually most abuse happens within families. So I just think I am so shocked by this, and I think we need to do something to wake people up.
And that thing, do you think sort of longer reporting like this story by Tasmin Low, is it? Or do we need something, do we need to go a step further? Because with the best will in the world, a very large portion of news consumers just reflexively turn away at any coverage of this issue, whether it's a straightforward news piece or 2,000 words in GT.
See, I don't agree with you. I think if you tell the story well, if the BBC made it its business, and Channel 4, that every time there was a killing of a woman by, you know, a male perpetrator or even a female. I mean, sometimes, you know, we do get female perpetrators, like mothers have murdered their daughters in some Pakistani and Afghan families. They tell that story in the way they're able to. It's because it's not there on our broadcast news, ever, except when it happens with Sarah Everard, because that was such an awful thing with a police officer, and we saw the footage, and look how it woke the country up.
I've just been thinking about this a lot because those poor sisters who were killed in the park.
Yes.
That's a park near my house. It's within a 10-minute walk. And part of the most shocking part of that story is we found out that the police were sharing pictures of the dead girls on their mobile phone WhatsApps. And for me, the bit that I always struggle with is because I think at that time, the chief of the Metropolitan Police was Cressida Dick.
Yes, the worst one ever.
And so it was a woman who was leading the Met Police. And the thing about the crisis that we see about violence against women is I always ask myself, okay, I have never, ever murdered a woman and never, ever thought about murdering one, but what could I do? I read everything that tells me that we're the problem, and I don't think I'm the problem. I don't have those instincts. So what can I do that would be helpful in some form? So I hear what you're saying about we need more better reporting, we need more higher profile reporting, but we also need something about what we tell our men and boys about what they can do to help. Without being told that you weren't doing this, but without being told men are the problem.
No. I think if you came out with us and said, not in our name, if all those demonstrations with Sarah Everard had as many men with us, imagine the impact. Imagine. I feel for the good men. I'm married to one. My son is one. But, men don't walk with us on this. And maybe they're afraid that they kind of
maybe because we don't know how or what we can do or how best to do it or how.
Fair point.
That's the bit that I always struggle with. It's like I desperately want to help, but then you're just sitting there going, but what can I do? Like, what can I actually do?
Stephen, in news terms, is this the big story of the cycle?
I think it is a big story, but I think it's a very complicated one for a number of reasons. And a lot of this is to do with the police. So on the one hand, the police are an organisation which, as we've clearly been hearing, have a lot of problems within themselves in dealing with this. The report, however, is an extremely interesting report. And the Chief Police Officer's report described violence against women and girls as being on a par with terrorism and organised crime in terms of its size. And they say it has reached such a scale that it is not something that we can solve through law enforcement alone. Now, there's a previous example of this, which is something called the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit, which began as the Strathclyde Reduction Unit, which was a very experimental project by a young Scottish police officer who, when she returned to Glasgow and saw the weekend death rate, having come from West Mercia Police, she said, this is ridiculous, this death rate. And they said, well, it's a weekend in Glasgow, what are you going to do? And she decided to treat violence in Strathclyde as a public health issue, not as a crime. And what she said is what we need to do is we need to stop the problem at the source. So it's great to arrest people after they've done it. What we need to do is work out where we find the cause of the disease and prevent it. And over the years, they reduced violent crime in Scotland by half. And where they focused
violent crime generally or specifically against women and girls?
No, violent crime generally.
Okay.
There were a lot of murders and stabbings at that time.
But where they focused in the end was primary schools. And the people that they recruited that were the most essential to that programme was primary school teachers. And the other thing she did is get the Scottish press in and say, I don't want you to report on what we're doing for the first 10 years, because we won't succeed at the speed that you need us to succeed in. This is not something we're going to solve in a week or 6 weeks or a year. This is something that's going to take a generation to fix. Now, the stats go up and down in Scotland. It's not an absolute copper-bottom, no-fault success. But the numbers, at the time that she started, Glasgow was the murder capital of Europe, and now it's not. So in a way, this is a story that if the police are serious, and if that report provokes that kind of response, then there is an argument to say this is a story that journalists should step away from if we have faith in the police. The problem is, I don't think we do have faith in the police, and I don't think that the Karen McCluskey, that's the name of the police officer who set up the violence reduction unit. I don't think I know of the Karen McCluskey in the police chief's operation. So I don't have that confidence yet. But there is an argument to say if we do have the confidence, then maybe it's not for us.
Yasmin, does it dilute the necessary outrage if you regard it as a public health problem rather than a law
No,
enforcement?
anything that helps. But I do think at the bottom of it is this universal, global belief, which my brother had too, which is your life is not yours. I own you. And it's that ownership. And there's this wonderful thing in Romeo and Juliet where Juliet's father says, and you be mine, I'll give you to my friend, and you be not, hang, die, beg, for I'll never be your dad or whatever. That idea of ownership. And that's what we need to, like, the girlfriend doesn't want you anymore. Fine, it hurts. We've all been hurt. She's not yours. And I don't know whether in school they're addressing this, and of course with all the internet and Andrew Tate's and all of this idea of ownership is at the heart of a lot of it, I think.
But the thing about Andrew Tate, I have to say, as objectionable as I find him, it goes back to what I was saying. If a young man today growing up, and I make no excuses about this, I'm just trying to contextualize it. If a young man today is growing up and either doesn't have a father figure or somebody showing them leadership, where are they going to seek out guidance? They're going to go on the internet. And what are they going to do? They're going to find somebody like Andrew Tate, who's buff, got girls and drink and whatever. Never mind that he's under house arrest for trafficking in Romania, but that's where they will find what it means to be a man. And that's, for me, a part of the huge problem, is that there's this massive vacuum. On the one hand, the young men are being told they're the problem. On the other hand, they go on the internet to find out what it means to be successful, these cars, these girls, and all the rest of it. And so, you're talking about the primary school. Huge part of this is the vacuum that exists of what it means to be a modern man in the modern day age.
Yeah, no, sure. And I think schools are doing a very good job on some of this. They really are. Some of the schools I've been to are really working very... But you see, the problem with the father in the home, a good father in the home is invaluable. But there are some fathers who shouldn't be there at all. Mm-hmm. That's also a problem.
Yasmin, last question, so you have the last word. I mean, there's the public policy side of this, which is in a sense a separate conversation. The really thing that I want to concentrate on, and you started with, is how you cut through, how you tell this story. Post Office, that story showed the only way to cut through now is to dramatise it and stick it on Netflix or ITV+.
Terrible interface. ITV+.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. That is my daughter, and she gets through on my silent phone.
This is important stuff. Real life has to continue, ladies and gentlemen.
That's bad fathering. I'm just going to just switch the phone off. There we go. Sorry.
She might need your help.
Yeah, she might.
She's quite brat, but...
I mean, that is a sort of a step into another realm out of journalism. It's an acknowledgement that the power of journalism to change people's minds, to make people rethink issues, is limited. Do you think we're at that point with this story?
We have had fantastic dramas on abusive partners, murders even. We've had them, we know. But I think what was fantastic about the Post Office dramatisation is it wasn't dramatic.
No.
It was made, it felt like this was real life. And one of the problems with domestic violence and murder is because we get so much, that's the other issue. 90% of our crime dramas start with a beautiful young woman dead, don't they? Mm. And why should every victim have to be a female who happens to be incredibly beautiful? I don't know. So drama, I certainly think fiction could do more. I think good documentaries could do a lot. I was amazed that nobody's made a documentary with this young woman who seems so articulate and who can talk about the complexities of how do you hate your father, who is your father, but he killed your mother, and why did he kill her? And what did she ever do? Do you know? But something has to happen because I cannot die with these figures going up and up and up.
You won't be part of the figures, though.
No, I'm too old now. No. Too old. Anyway,
Hopefully
I scare
not.
men.
Hopefully not.
I scare men.
What a line to end a pitch on. All right.
I've met your wonderful husband as well.
Thank you all very much. Those are the stories. How Kamala Harris, by the way, Kamala Harris is the pronunciation, has already taken social media by storm and arguably launched her campaign with rocket fuel. Labour indiscipline or indifference in relation to the 7 rebels, and rapidly rising levels of violence against women. In a bit, I have to choose the top story, but before I do, you guys have to tell me what you think should lead the news, and the rule is you cannot choose your own story. Stephen, what would you lead with?
It's very difficult. I think that there is something to be investigated about the reporting of the violence against women and girls that I think... I think it's a vital story. I'm not sure that doing a straightforward report at the top of the news is... I think journalists have a responsibility to look at how we do that. And because I don't know how we do that, I would not put it at the top. That's because I don't know how... I think that it needs to change. Reporting needs to change as well. And I think there needs to be... We need to go off into a room and think hard about how those stories are covered. So I would say that the most obvious leading for the story out of those two would be Labour, because it's a much more straightforward story to report. So I'm going to be a coward and say Labour.
Wow. Brave, in a sense, and admitting how cowardly you're being. OK. Hashi, which story would you lead?
I can't choose my own story, but I would lead with Stephen's story, only because hopefully somebody can make it in a way that I understand what the hell he just spoke about. Because after like 15 to 20 minutes, all I have in my head is a coconut that opens with Kamala Harris with her sunglasses.
Who looks like Amal Clooney, actually, as well.
So I'm hoping that as a millennial who's in touch with Gen Zs, that somebody will be able to explain it to me pithily.
He's saying that I wasn't really...
I mean, maybe your daughter could...
Thank you. Yasmin, which one do you choose?
I'm really interested in this assessment of Keir Starmer before and just after he's got power. I would prefer for it to be almost a kind of study of Keir Starmer, because I think very few of us can get our heads around him. So I think, particularly as we're getting to know him, it would be very interesting.
That's the angle that you'd...
But
I think she's picking my stories.
Yeah, I am. But saying that, besides the kind of...
She's saying you got your angle wrong.
No. I thought the angle was very good. But I think for a lot of people who are wondering who he is and why he does what he does, yeah.
OK. Thank you very much. So Stephen is choosing the Labour story, Hashi choosing Stephen's story, and Yasmin choosing Keir Starmer. I'm completely torn because I can see the lethal conundrum not as clearly as Yasmin, because she's been reporting it for years, but I can see the problem that we're all in. This should be at the top of the news every day, and it isn't because we haven't found a way to cut through. Everybody intellectually can understand the importance of it, but I guess what you're saying, in a sense, by picking out the story of Tamzin Lowe, if that's her name, is that you only viscerally get the importance of it if you're personally affected by it. If these numbers are trustworthy, and there's no reason to think they're not, then we presumably at some point quite soon will reach a critical mass where everybody is personally affected by this, and perhaps at that point we get the cut through. My instinct is that journalistically we don't know, we cannot anticipate exactly what story told in which way is going to do this. We just have to keep throwing versions of it at the wall and see what sticks. I'm going to break the rule of the news meeting by saying I'm going to lead with that, and it's going to be one of those amazing sort of double headers, whether it's tortoise, a day on tortoise or a day on the news program, and Kamala Harris, because I'm really excited about the Kamala Harris story. The way I think of it is Kung Fu Panda. He receives the missiles, the flaming missiles thrown at him by the enemy. I forget who the enemy is. And he turns around and spins like crazy and hurls them back at the enemy, right? That's what I think is happening. And I think it's much more than simply memification of Kamala Harris or the meshing of pop culture and politics. I think what we have seen in the last even less than 48 hours, 24 hours, is the transformation of a candidate who could easily have been dismissed quite quickly by her own side, as well as the Republicans, as not up to it, into a candidate who may very well be up to it, who may very well, lots of caveats here, we're sitting here in London, pretending to know what's going on in a vast country, and very few people do know much about it, who are not there. But those caveats aside, I'm excited. I think I'm feeling the sort of tingle from 2008, the tingle from even 1989, way back, that something could happen, and whatever your politics, the sheer schadenfreude, the idea of seeing the monster in orange brought down by somebody who he simply cannot compute how to deal with, the idea of that is very exciting. So that is going to be equal top of the news. I'm afraid, Hashi, Starmer's party management is interesting. We're going to get 5 more years of it at least. We've just had 14 years of Tory party management. That's bottom. So
we should get the vote from the people.
I think we will in just a second.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, in fact, we have got to that point. So I've said what I think. Since we have an audience, thank you very much for coming. What do you think, first of all, about what should have led from what we've been discussing and what we've missed? Yes, at the front. Tell us your name.
My name's Abby. One story I would have said was Elon Musk and how he's backing Trump and donating really vast sums and using his platform on Twitter.
But is he really?
Oh?
The latest on that, and it is only one source that I saw today, you may know more than me, is that he's distancing himself from the 45 million a month pledge.
Okay. Even still, he is openly sort of saying, Kamala is not qualified for the role. He's using his vast platform to really sort of go against her. So that'll be...
Good call. You know what? I'm really fascinated. And it's a guilty pleasure, in a sense, following Musk. But I have to edit myself and not run stories on him because people tell me that this is all rooted in an old bromance and I give him too much time. But I agree, fascinating. Anyone else? Any other story? Yes.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon. And a story that hasn't left my mind for the last 24 hours is the killing of Sonia Massey. I like the video footage is chilling, and I guess it's similar to what Yasmin was saying about the violence here. I guess the police violence in the US. I think with the Sarah Everard, you hoped it would have been a turning point.
Sonia was the one that was killed by the police officer in her house.
Yes, when she called 911 for help from the police officers. And I think that, people hoped that George Floyd could have been a turning point. And I think it really just points to the fact that perhaps we need to...
I didn't even know about this.
It was caught on camera. It was also caught on his camera.
48 hours ago now. It was horrific. The whole thing's on camera. And I think also something that's really troubling me is the fact that now I'm seeing these headlines that the police officer who murdered her has, I think he had six appointments in the last however many years, and has basically just continually lost his job. And the fact, I think it just shows you need to look more at these hiring processes, these training processes, because clearly there's fundamental things going wrong.
When you say 6 appointments,
I can't remember the exact issue.
Promotions, I think.
Or,
okay.
Or was it?
I think it was
He'd had disciplinary hearings against him, and he'd been in other police forces and left and changed police forces and stuff.
Yeah, and I study in the US. I spent the last 2 years living there and just talking with my friends there in the last 24 hours.
Gosh, I didn't
It's just
know.
horrifying, the fact that you obviously want to feel safe, I guess similarly with the domestic violence cases. You want to feel safe being able to contact the police and go there for help, as Sonia did. And just that trust in the police deteriorating from any progress it could have made in the past 4 or 5 years.
Even with the
but that's very
Sarah
important.
Everard story is an interesting one, because that was also an example where he had previous issue and the police weren't sharing.
Yeah, and you've raised a very important issue, which is true here in the United States and in parts of Europe, which is that women no longer trust the police. So what happens then? Your life is in danger, you're being beaten up, but you don't trust the police. So it adds another layer, doesn't it, really?
Exactly, yeah.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Sophie, and it's more of a thought, really, just around your topic, Yasmin. It's something that me and my female friends, colleagues, talk about all the time. And Sarah Everard is always our main point of reference. And you said that you'd wish there had been a shift when that happened, and there really was, but only with women. Like, we're so much more scared now than we were before. Excuse my voice, I've been quite unwell the last few days. Because after that, we thought, holy shit, even police are going to do this to us. And what we really need to try and understand is how we can make men angry. So actually, when you ask, what can we do? How do we make men angry? Like, when we talk about the Sarah Everard case, me and my friends, new colleagues, whatever, if I say the name Wayne Couzens, they all know who I'm talking about. If I say it to men, they go, who? What? Like, they read it and they're like, doesn't affect me, doesn't affect me. So how do we rally men to be really angry about what's happening? Because we're never going to fix the problem unless men come along with us on that journey.
Good thought. Samia.
I was just going to add to the Kamala Harris story that Xavier Worker taught us. From the Donald Trump side of things, yesterday there was also a video release of Donald Trump playing golf with a double US Open champion, which very quickly got 4 million views on YouTube. It was a fairly compelling watch, and Trump is actually he's better at golf than I would have thought. But it speaks to an interesting point, which I think was your point about, we're just watching this on the surface. Like, who is watching all the Brat memes and who is watching the Donald Trump playing golf? It seems like in some ways, on both sides, the election is being fought as much in the world of culture and sports and all these things which sort of sit outside politics as it is in politics itself. And I would be interested in seeing a sort of segmented audience of, well, who's seeing all of that content and who's seeing all of that content.
Also, particularly, that election is going to be decided by a vanishingly small number of voters, isn't it, by and large? I mean, you're very good on the stats on this, Charles, but there's a certain number of counties in a certain number of states. And in effect, when you boil that down, probably the question is how many people in those counties are watching that content, and that sort of becomes critical in the world's greatest superpower. So
we assume that, though. I think what's exciting about the Harris phenomenon, if it continues to be one, could fizzle very quickly, is whether she can mobilise a part of the electorate that didn't vote in 2020, didn't vote in 2016, and would be perhaps different from the part of the electorate that Obama unquestionably mobilised in 2008 and 2012, and very different from the one that Trump unquestionably mobilised in 2016. Were you being, Xavier, sarcastic about the compelling nature of this golf clip?
He was actually quite good. I agree with you. For somebody who's so overweight, and you wouldn't think that, he was actually hitting some good balls.
It was the first time where there were real Trumpisms in the video, insofar as he was like he was like talking up his own golf game, and or you know, so he was bombastic in the same way as he is in his rallies. But it was, yeah, I'd never seen him within that context before. It was quite bizarre. I think I'd only ever seen him in a political interview or in a rally, and I was suddenly seeing him talking about golf and being more conversational. It does not appeal to me in the slightest. I imagine there are some people who watch that and think, hey, he does have a personality.
I'm putting a prediction down now that he's going to win in November. I was in Florida in May for 2 weeks with my family, and we drove around almost half the state, and I kid you not, I found Trump posters and Trump flags everywhere around Florida, and that's obviously one of the major estates. And I thought to myself, okay, and then now he's this immortal guy who dodged a bullet, you know.
True.
So I'd be very surprised if he loses in November. Very.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you very much.